Mr. Vice Chairman of GMB, Shri Beniwal, distinguished panelists and guests. The fact is the world fleet is aging. According to United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, the average age of the world shipping fleet at the start of this year was 22.2 years. More than half of the world's fleet is over 15 years old. According to BIMCO, 15,000 ships, or about 12.5% of the world fleet, has to be recycled in the next 10 years. This is double the number of ships that we have recycled in the previous 10 years. Therefore, the demand for sustainable ship recycling capacity is unprecedented, and India will provide the solutions the world needs. Let me tell you how. So the first key question is, we hear the term, what is sustainable ship recycling? So I'm going to ask 3 questions, and I'm going to answer them myself. What is sustainable ship recycling? Does ship recycling play a role in the global climate change narrative? It's a very important question. And how does ship recycling in India contribute towards decarbonization efforts and optimize asset values? What is the magic trick? While a detailed discussion of the above questions can last hours, let me give you a general idea in 5 minutes. What is sustainable recycling? You define sustainable recycling. It is also known as green recycling. It's also known as responsible recycling. But the bottom line is that sustainable recycling is all about recycling ships safely and responsibly in accordance with IMO's soon to come into force Hong Kong Convention guidelines. It aims to protect the environment from pollution, safeguard workers' health and safety, and carefully dispose of hazardous materials, and finally, maximize the asset value. It is important to note that the residual value, we call in the business scrap value, is vital, since sustainable ship recycling cannot exist without economic value. Does ship recycling play a role in the global climate change narrative? The simple answer is yes. The world has woken up to the problems of climate change and CO2 emissions. You go to any shipping conference and you hear the words like decarbonization, net zero, carbon neutrality, circular economy, etc. These words have become the part of our business vocabulary today. As we know, the 3 major contributors to greenhouse gas emissions are, number 1, production of energy, electricity, industrials, which is manufacturing of steel, and number 3 is transportation. These are the 3 factors that contribute majority of the greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, if we can reuse or recycle steel, we reduce the demand for electricity by reducing the demand to manufacture steel from iron ore and reduce the need to transport coal and iron ore. Maybe the ship owners don't want to hear this. Now, ship recycling plays a significant role in achieving all 3 of the fundamentals of the circular economy, which leads us to the final question: how does recycling in India contribute towards decarbonization efforts and optimize asset values? What is the secret sauce? As you know, India is the world's largest green recycling country. It has more than 110 Hong Kong compliant recycling yards. As someone in the last 30 years having visited shipyards globally from China to Turkey to US, I can say without hesitation that selling ships, no other country in the world does a better job than turning scrapping into recycling than India, and turning regular steel into green steel. More importantly, Indian yards again do this by providing the highest scrap value to these shop owners, which I said earlier is critical because there can be no sustainable recycling without economic value. So what makes ship recycling in India sustainable and ESG compliant? Simply stated, as Shri Beniwal said, is the reuse and recycle. In India, a remarkable 97% of the ship materials can be recycled or repurposed, 97%. Here's how. 90% of the ship is made of steel, and steel has a long lifespan. 4% of a ship is about machineries, like main engines, pumps, and other mechanical devices. 1% of a ship is non-ferrous items, such as copper, aluminum, brass, bronze, stainless steel, etc. And 1% is furniture and fixtures, which is things like wooden panels, doors, beds, etc. So in India, out of this 90% of the steel, 70% of the steel is re-rolled, not melted, re-rolled. 10% is considered profile plates that go repurposed into flanges and angles. And only 10% is designated as melting scrap for electric arc furnaces. Now in comparison, 85% of the steel in European yards is generally exported to Turkey as steel scrap that goes into induction furnaces. An exceedingly small percentage is re-rolled and hardly any is reused. Herein is the secret sauce. This is the single biggest factor why Indian yards can offer almost $300 per ton more than the countries in Europe. On the size of a Panamax container, this equates to about $6.5 million more. That's a lot of money. Additionally, reusing this steel saves CO2 emissions and attaches more significant value to steel by eliminating an extra layer of energy, heavy energy consuming activities like transportation of iron scrap. More going further, the same steel that we are talking about, 1 ton of recycled steel saves about 1.1 tons of virgin iron ore. 1 ton saves roughly more than 1.1 tons of iron ore. It saves about 642 kilowatts of energy, 1.8 barrels of oil, 4 cubic yards of landfill, and the list goes on and on. As Mr. Beniwal said, more than 8,500 ships have been recycled in Alang. You know, there's about 62 million tons of steel that Alang has recovered. That's enough steel to make about 8,500 Eiffel Towers. That's a lot of steel. The wood that has come out of these ships, in 10 years, about 50,000 tons of wood has been recovered from recycling of ships in Alang. This wood has been reused directly into interiors of homes, offices, and other commercial spaces. This has saved about 440 football fields of forest cover and has captured about 1,500 tons of carbon dioxide. A lot of big numbers here. Non-ferrous metals, about 140,000 tons of expensive non-ferrous items, which has a premium value here. All of these examples demonstrate simply one thing. The economic value and sustainability of ship recycling in India cannot be matched by any other country. But that's not all. Unlike Europe, where yards can get automatically on the list of EU-approved yards by being simply in Europe, without any audits from class societies, in India, ships are recycled safely and environmentally friendly manner under the spotlight of world's leading 5 IX class societies. 2 of them are at least on the stage today, and supervised by many leading auditing agencies hired by the ship owners. So what about the waste? Again, Shri Beniwal has said only 0.5% of the ship is waste. This is identified via IHM, safely removed by trained workforce equipped with PPEs, transported securely to the government-controlled certified waste disposal site, and disposed according to international norms and standards. This entire process is also supervised and audited by trained personnel. So in conclusion, over 25 years, ship recycling, which was initially known as what Dr. Martin Stofford calls the 3 Ds, dirty, dangerous, and depressing. This was 25 years ago. In the last 15 years, the ship recycling industry has changed. With the assistance of Indian government, regulators, IMO, especially Norway and Japan, Indian yards took the initiative to go green following the guidelines of HKC. Starting with 4 yards in 2015, which obtained Class NK Statement of Compliance, today 111 yards are HKC compliant. This is an increase of 2,675% in only 8 years. This kind of growth is unprecedented. The world needs India's recycling capacity, and the world needs India's purchasing power. Without India's ship recycling industry, the world fleet would have limited sustainable ship recycling options. Without India, national governments may have to resort to desperate measures such as the scuttling of the aircraft carrier Sao Paulo in Brazil earlier this year, an environmental nightmare of epic proportions, or the abandoning of old vessels polluting our seas with decaying ghost fleets, a dramatic increase in shipping costs, and a negative impact on world trade. Ladies and gentlemen, therefore, I earnestly hope that Europe eliminates EU ship recycling regulation, and once HKC comes into force in less than 2 years, there is one standard by which sustainable recycling is governed. I applaud the Indian and Gujarat governments for supporting this critical industry in the maritime world. Dhanyavad.